Welcome to the Omnibus Show, a program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. And now your host, Dave Gibbs.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Omnibus Show, the program for people who are interested in everything, with deep conversations on a wide variety of subjects. This week's guest is Don Farrell, who is the president and CEO of Crossroads Entertainment, as well as the co-founder of Actors Theater of Indiana. And he's been in so many programs and shows, it would take us the rest of the show to list them out. But Don, great to have you with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave.
Well, thank you. Well, why don't we go right into it?
Sure.
When you talk about theater, I always like listening to people's stories because that tells a story. It's a song in itself. Can you tell us about what led you to this great life of theater?
Let's see. I've always been grew up in a household of music. Mom and dad, not musicians themselves, but they listened to music a lot. A lot of R&B, a lot of Frank Sinatra, Neil Diamond. We had I guess it was a monthly subscription to Columbia Records.
Oh, right.
You remember that?
Yeah, the little...
And when you tried to end your subscription, how hard that was.
It kept coming.
It just kept on coming.
From Terre Haute, Indiana.
Was that right?
Yes.
From Terre Haute? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
How about everything, all roads lead back to Indiana, isn't that so?
There you go.
And so wide variety of music during growing up. LPs, of course. Listened to Johnny Mathis every Christmas. We had the Frank Sinatra going every Christmas. So the songbook, unbeknownst to myself at the time, it just became part of the fabric of our lives growing up. Mom and Dad growing up in North Carolina and all of the dancing that they would do on the beaches there with shag dancing and R&B, shuffling around. And so in a way, it just kind of became a little bit of a background to ourselves growing up.
Okay.
And then fast forward to in high school, I got involved a little bit with music, and that led to theater, a little bit of theater through the church of all places. I grew up Catholic at St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Church, and they had a drama ministry there. And I tried out for this thing called a musical, didn't know what it was. And it started there with a musical about Francis, St. Francis of Assisi. That had a run Off-Broadway of all places. I did not know that.
Did it really?
It did. And so that began the journey of an interest in theater itself, and it just grew to eventually being exposed to performers of my age at a holiday Christmas party that my dad had for IBM. He worked for IBM. And seeing a whole bunch of kids my age performing professional Broadway quality review show.
Wow.
And I thought, maybe I could do something. I wish I could do something like that. And that led me to an opportunity to audition for that touring show through Northside School of the Arts, which was the magnet school. If you think about Fame, the famous television show Fame, and the
was
high
that
school.
Of that particular school?
Of that school.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so that was like the Fame of Atlanta, Georgia. Because I grew up in Georgia.
Yeah.
And auditioned for it, eventually got cast into it, and that introduced me to a wide variety of other types of art forms as well, more in dance and different types of music and other ways of performing. And because of the Magnet School for the Performing Arts that was working in conjunction with Atlanta Better Business Bureau and Coca-Cola, as we know everything in Georgia is Coca-Cola, we had the opportunity to be able to perform for audiences in London and in Tokyo and Osaka.
The high school.
The high school kids, yeah.
Well, and that's quite an underwriting.
That kind of led me into thinking maybe this is something I wanted to do. And I saw the joy performing, not only it gave me, but it also gave to others. And so I decided to audition for and apply for University of Cincinnati College-Conservatory Music. I got my BFA in music theater there. And then off to the races, if you graduate and then You go to New York City, like
So,
everybody says.
New
if you
York
can-
City was the place to be.
That was the place to go.
Yeah.
If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
So I had been in New York City from 91 up until 2005, working
Yeah.
in New York City, working regionally around the nation. And those performance opportunities as an actor gave me other opportunities that came my way to direct. Never thought of myself as a director. So taking yourself out of what the little box you kind of put yourself into, I think we all can be sometimes guilty of that as we're growing and learning that the possibilities and opportunities are really there if you're able to think about it and make it come true.
Now, Don, is there a particular performance that was defining for you in all of that period? Because that's a lot of life right there.
There's always many shows. I've been very, very blessed to be castable. And
that could be a title to a show. Castable.
Yes,
You
I
can
was
have
castable.
You can have the copyright on that one.
Thank you.
There's a tune in there somewhere.
I'm sure. We'll have to look that up. I'll do
There you
Spotify on it.
Edit that out so somebody doesn't steal the copyright. Copyright that when we get done with the show.
Love it. But yeah, so many opportunities I've been very blessed to be able to have.
Well, good.
As far as defining performance, people ask me what my favorite show is. It's really the show that I'm doing. I find so much joy in whatever project that I'm working on at that time. And there's always something great to take away from it. I remember a big reflective moment was 9/11. It was for all of us.
Sure.
And I was living in New York City at the time.
You were in New York City at the time.
Yeah. But when that tragic morning happened, I was actually out at a regional theater directing and choreographing a production of The Taffetas, which is it's a jukebox musical about these four sisters from Muncie, Indiana. Mythical, it's all fictitious.
Back from Indiana.
All roads back to
So
Indiana.
it's kind of like an Andrews Sisters kind of a thing?
Yeah, it was like Lennon,
But
the
made
Lennon
up.
sisters.
Lennon sisters.
Lennon sisters, McGuire sisters.
Right.
And they go to New York City to put on a show on Spotlight on Music, a television show.
There you go.
Doesn't really happen, but I used to think when I was starting that rehearsal process, I thought, this is such a fluffy show. It couldn't harm a fly if it tried. We're just going to escape, and enjoy this 1950s music. 9/11 happens. And the artistic director asks me if we should cancel rehearsal, and we come in to have a rehearsal, which is really more of a bonding moment for all the actors to get together as to what we as a nation are going through. And as a world, I think after that reflective moment,
Sure.
I think all of us have been changed. And I realized at that moment that what I assumed was a fluffy musical, it showed the power that music and theater has to be able to bring us together and heal, because in that show, even though it's about these four sisters who go on to do, and they do, Mockingbird Hill, and they're doing all these great classics. From the 50s, there's a moment where they do this travel medley, and in the travel medley is the Chevrolet commercial. See the USA in your Chevrolet. America's asking you to call. See the USA in your Chevrolet. America's the greatest land of all. When that lyric came about for that audience, when we sang that, the girls sang that song, the audience broke into applause. At the end of the show, sang the national anthem.
Oh, wow.
It brought everybody, and what I just kind of discarded as a fluffy little musical showed me the power that genre of musical theater has to heal and bring us together. So from that moment on, and I kind of knew it, but that really stuck out to me as a moment where we have the ability and, in a way, the responsibility to take our craft very seriously. It's a very noble profession in what I believe as an artist. We have the ability to make people's lives better. And that's ever since then, in one shape, form, or another, I try my best to do that, and with the people that I work with.
That's a very strong story. Yeah, I would say that that's the heart of really what entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I think if you want to call it its origins or what people have created to entertain within the tribe, or when people are coming together, that sort of thing where they're they get away from the job.
Mm-hmm.
They go out on a Saturday evening with their wife, and it's like you have this kind of relief. But when you have these type of serious matters that happen, the way it can really touch people's lives, and so that's really entertainment at its strongest.
It can be.
That's quite a story.
And all of us have those, whether I'm as a performer, an artist, but really in all aspects of life, whatever it is, we all have been given amazing gifts.
Yeah.
And how do we choose to use those gifts?
That is very, very true. How do you carry on from that one? That's a pretty strong story. And you were there till 2005.
2005, yep.
And then
I like I said, I worked at a lot of different regional theaters around, and I had a variety of different mentors. And there's one gentleman who actually led the musical theater department at University of Cincinnati College-Conservatory Music. His name is Worth Gardner, and he is a brilliant man, a visionary, very amazingly creative. And so when I graduated, I was lucky enough to be able to be cast in some of his shows, and to the point where I became an assistant to him, and sometimes assistant director. And he would work out at the gym. He's one of these big buff guys. I mean, he would compete type of guy. He was huge, very imposing when you audition for him. You just see this guy behind you, like, who is this guy? But brilliant man. And one time we were at the gym, of all places, because that's where I'd see him, and he'd go, "Hey, Don, we're doing this show in Michigan. You want to go do it?" I was like, "Of course." That's the best way to get a gig, is when somebody's just coming up saying, "Hey, let's go."
Yeah, of course.
But after 9/11 happened, one of the things he said to me, I was kind of frustrated. I'd been doing some work with symphonies, but I guess it was a lull in my career a little bit, and I was like frustrated, because actors are always, we get this syndrome where you feel like you're feeling great when you're doing the performing, but once you're done with it, you're like, I'll never work again. What's going to happen?
Wow.
And so I guess I was a little bit in that moment. And he said, "Don, have you ever thought of, you know people who build sets, right?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. You know people who do lights and do costumes." I was like, "Sure." He goes, "If you wanted to put something on, you could, if you wanted to. You could just start making the telephone calls instead of waiting for the phone to ring." And that moment just was like an aha moment, that I thought, wow, I guess it takes some effort, as anything does worth doing. But once I started shifting my way, instead of thinking I have to wait around for other people to give me a gig, that I can actually just turn that and turn the tables a little bit and start making things happen. It gave me a sense of an empowerment. And I started thinking that way a little bit more, and I started looking at the other theaters that would believe in me to put on and direct for them. And I thought, well, if these other theaters are believing in me enough, maybe I should believe in myself. So that started the ball rolling into thinking about, hey, what if myself and two other ladies who we would do shows with together regionally, I presented it and said, what if we started our own theater company? And that was with Judy Fitzgerald and Cynthia Collins. And they loved the idea too. We all were like, huh, yeah. And I think we were at this transition moment in our lives too, to kind of create for ourselves and for our community, and find another community that we could, we love New York City, one of the greatest cities in the world, but I think we all had that same reflective moment. The ladies could answer that question. Everybody has a different story, but I think we all had that same feeling. And so we were looking at just trying to decide where to go. My family wanted me to go down to Atlanta, Georgia, of course. And Cynthia Collins, she's from Livingston, New Jersey, but that's right across the river from New York.
Yes, she was with us on an earlier episode.
Oh, was she?
Yeah,
Oh, great. Yeah,
she
yeah.
was.
So Cindy, and then Judy Fitzgerald was born and raised here in Indianapolis, and I was familiar with Indianapolis with previous working engagements with Beef and Board's Dinner Theater or the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra.
Sure.
So I was familiar, but not really knew about it. And then through a mutual friend of Judy, Cindy, and myself, opened the door to meet with Mayor Brainerd, and then shared with us the vision of what, And at the time, I even told the mayor this afterwards. I said, Jim, I remember those early days. I thought, this sounds great. You're preaching to the choir what you're going to do with culture and making it economic driven. I've seen that work. But I always thought, you're a politician. It's never going to happen. Sounds good. Never happened. And sure shooting, here it is. Here it all is, right? It's
here
amazing.
we are.
And we're so blessed to live in a community that does. And I think we're all recipients of the benefits of that through not only all the wonderful amenities that we have here, but also just the quality of life that it adds to either living, working, or playing in a community like this. And so I love to call it home.
Yes.
Great place.
Yes, you've been Hoosierfied.
I have been Hoosierfied.
There you go. Well, that's a great high point for us to end with this chapter.
Oh, great. Yeah.
So we'll be back after a quick break for Chapter 2 of the Omnibus Show. Hello, and welcome back to Chapter 2 of the Omnibus Show with Don Farrell. Well, we were talking about theater, and you had so many great stories for us. I always like asking this from people because it tells me a lot. It's like your library of life. What are some favorites of yours, Don? Let me throw out a show and a tune.
A show and a tune. All right. One show, we're in the business of storytelling, right?
Yes.
And creating memories. I love the ability to create a memory that just appreciates in value. Mm-hmm. And every time, that's one of the beautiful things about live theater. It's always going to be a little bit different tomorrow night than tonight's performance, but it's always so unique if it's done well and people are in the moment. Well, there was a great experience that I had. At first, I thought it was going to be an awful experience, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But this is with Actors Theater of Indiana, and I want to say this is like 2013, maybe, something like that. And we were at the Studio Theater. We're the resident professional theater company at the Center for the Performing Arts. And we were doing Neil Simon's The Odd Couple. Loved Neil Simon. What a brilliant playwright.
And very funny.
Great stuff. And performing with a dear friend of mine, Bradley Reynolds, and we were in the Studio Theater. It was our closing performance of The Odd Couple. And I was playing Oscar as well. And sometimes people think that's typecasting. So we were going to strike the set right after that closing performance.
Sure, this is the last show.
Last show, yeah. Time to break it down, put it all back in storage. Well, there was a storm brewing about that time, and we got through Act 1, and we got through intermission, but we kept getting word from stage management that the storm is heading our way, but we just got to keep on going. And we started Act 2. And right after the first scene, maybe into the second scene of Act 2, over the loudspeaker comes the stage manager to call the show. We got to stop the show. We've got word that there's tornadoes been sighted. We need to take the entire audience and move the audience into an interior room. And everybody has to move inside.
Sure. Away
from windows, all that type of stuff.
Yes.
And so we moved from the Studio Theater into a rehearsal room adjacent to the Studio Theater, which actually was the rehearsal room of Booth Tarkington Civic Theater. Mm-hmm. So our dear friends over at Booth Tarkington Civic let us borrow that space to put all of our patrons in there, as well as the actors. And so we're watching the clock, and we're thinking, can we get this show back up? We need to finish the show. and time keeps ticking. No, we don't have it all clear yet. Don't have it all clear. And everybody's kind of we keep trying to keep, let the audience know what's happening. And it gets to the point where like, I had to call the shot too, because I'm also wearing a hat. So all three of us, Judy, Cindy, and myself, we all wore a lot of different hats, especially at the early days.
Well, you would have worn a Mets hat.
I would have worn a Mets hat. You're right. I did.
Night.
I did wear a Mets hat. And my Atlanta Braves friends didn't like that too much.
Yeah. Well, you were playing Oscar.
That's right. I'm playing a role. And so I said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start taking apart the set, but not the set per se. Start taking the furniture that we're utilizing, and so let's start moving it into the rehearsal space. Let's start getting as many chairs as we can to create like an audience, a performance space there in the rehearsal room. And we started back over at the beginning of Act 2, under fluorescent lights, no theatrical lighting and fancy, scenic values. And we finished Act 2, and we had the wonderful people working at the center is so great because you've got the staff there at the center as well that helps support. All of the concession people were bringing in snacks and food and sodas for people to be able to make the patrons have a good experience.
That's very nice.
We had a closing night party, so all of the food that we were going to have during strike, we all brought in. So it was just very communal type of thing. And it was a really unique experience for the audience and the actor. And we finished because the show must go on. And so those type of opportunities to create a memory, like I mentioned earlier, that we'll appreciate and value. And it becomes kind of like a theater lore moment. Were you there when?
That is a theater lore moment. Especially with that tension with the possibility of a tornado out there.
Yeah.
And, that's the sort of the specter out there. And then you just kind of do this really personal kind of, hey, we're going to finish this off.
It was a great experience. What I thought was going to be a bad experience, if you can just, everybody comes together, we're all very creative people. My dad passed away, unfortunately, in 2020, but one of the things I got, not to bring it down, but it's an up thing, because my dad above his desk had a sign, and it's above my desk now, too. And it says, I'm not interested in how the job can't be done. There's always a way to figure things out. It takes a little bit of creativity and, elbow grease, but you can figure it out. And that turned out to be a really great experience.
That's a very great thought.
Yeah.
Because that's carry on. You just, let's get her done.
Get her done.
Yeah. Wow, what a great story.
And so that would be a good standout. There's so many different stories of different theater experiences created by talented friends, much more talented than me, that I've been blessed to work with on stage. But that's one. And then as far as music goes, there's so many great songs. How do you choose a song? I mean, Fly Me to the Moon is a great song. Everybody loves that. Whether it's Summer Wind, of course, I love the whole Frank Sinatra catalog. But it's kind of whatever show I'm working on.
Fill my heart with song and let me sing forevermore. You are all I long for, all I worship and adore. In other words, please be true. In other words, I love you.
Right now, I'm really delving into Jimmy Buffett. I'm writing a show with my collaborator Terry Woods on Jimmy Buffett and learning. That's
a
about
genre
him.
Jumper.
It is, isn't it? I mean,
Yes.
I like to keep it fresh. We were doing Sinatra shows here at Feinstein's. This is kind of like a home, resident home of mine now. Thanks, I started during the pandemic. Another reset button, like I mentioned, 9/11.
Sure.
Now with the pandemic for everybody, that was I started an LLC, and that was branching out of an opportunity that when I was with Actors Theater of Indiana, working together with Hotel Carmichael and Feinstein's to create content here. And my dear friend Meg Osborne, she was mentioning they were talking about wanting to have a Sinatra show in here, and she mentioned, well, Don Farrell sings a lot of Sinatra. And I was like, well, thanks, Meg, I appreciate that. And they were like, we've got this guy coming from Chicago, but we got to put him up in the hotel. I was like, you could do that, but I'm right here in your backyard. If you want me to look into, they said yes. And so I got with my collaborator, Terry Woods, and we put together a really fun show that celebrates Frank Sinatra. And we've been doing it ever since 2021. And we were the first, the official opening was, of course, with Michael Feinstein. This is his room, and we're honored to be able to play it. And but before the big grand opening, when they're kind of working out how the food and beverage goes, the staffing, we did our Sinatra show in March of 2021, and we've been doing it ever since. And that went well, to the point where they said, well, why don't you come up with something else? And I was like, what's different than that? So I looked over at the Great American Songbook Hall of Fame, and there was Barry Manilow. I was like, that's different than Frank Sinatra. So we did a docu-cabaret on Barry Manilow.
And tell me, when will our eyes meet? When can I touch you? When will this strong yearning end? And when will I hold you again?
Which led to a docu-cabaret about Tony Bennett, which led to a docu-cabaret about Neil Diamond, and it just keeps going on. And now I'm working on...
Was Hoagie Carmichael next?
Hoagie Carmichael. We do have Hoagie Carmichael in the queue, so to speak.
Now, you've mentioned something, and I've not heard that term until you've brought it up. Don, what is a docu-cabaret?
It's the best word I can use to describe what has become a niche that Terry and I have fallen into. We've seen plenty of tribute shows about different artists, but what I love documentaries. I love the context, the behind the scenes, what inspired, where was Frank Sinatra during this time in his life? Where was whoever it would be, and how did it affect him? What are cool stories, the behind the scenes stories about how some of these songs came about? And so, not to get into I please don't misinterpret. I don't want anybody to think it's like a music appreciation class in college. It is, but it isn't. It's a party. It's a party celebrating the music that we all know and love, but everybody walks away with a little glimpse of like, huh, I didn't know about that.
So you do a story with the tune.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how.
And each one of the stories, each one of the songs are, because they're crafted so well, they stand alone on their own merit as little one acts all throughout. And it's a joy. It's such a joy between singing that material in this room with the musicians, and Terry does the arrangements, and it's just it's a true treat. There's no experience like, from a singer standpoint, being able to sing with really, really great musicians. And I've been very blessed to be able to work with Eric Kunzel and the Cincinnati Pops Orchestra, and Pops Orchestras all across the United States. Alfred Savia and the Indianapolis Symphony Orchestra, Jack Everly and the ISO during Yuletide many times before, or once before. And so there's nothing like being able to sing behind, standing in front of great musicians.
Yeah, because they'll just carry you through that.
Yeah.
It's like, what was that line? Okay, we'll come back around that and I'll lift you up, and there it is again.
Yeah.
No, that is really good. That's interesting. Well, thank you for letting us know what that is.
That's the only way I could, and that's what people found when they would come back. They said, I love the music and everything, but I love the stories that you're telling. And I thought, I think we're onto something here.
Yeah.
People want to know, because they all have a personal connection with the song.
Sure.
But if they find out that, like, Nancy with a Laughing Face was never originally called Nancy with a Laughing Face, how did that come about? It was so many cool stories that I can be able to share about.
Yeah, that is fascinating. That makes me just wonder, like, there's so many, you could just go on and on doing
You really can. There's
you
so
really,
much, there's so many great songs, there's so many great artists out there, so many great stories to tell.
Yeah, because that really strong as it is. And a lot of the songbook stories are stories themselves, as you have said. and to be able to pull that together, that's quite an entertainment.
Yeah.
That's really taking it to another level. And talk about taking it to another level. You've taught courses, master classes, and well, if our audience was interested in pursuing theater today, and you were doing there's so many things you can go with theater, so many directions.
Sure.
From the musical part to the drama part to just everyday part, and the pursuit of a career, the pursuit of all these different aspects. What is some wisdom that you would have for someone who's up and coming, who would be watching the show?
I would say I can't say it's from me, because these are lessons I've learned from others. I
Sure.
talk about Worth Gardner, who said, shift your focus as to knowing, you can make things happen. You don't have to always wait for others to make things happen.
That's good.
It does take vision. It does take work. It does take a certain amount of risk. But also, if you know that there's risk involved, you also know that there's an ROI. If you put in the work and you really fully believe in what you're doing. Also, one of the things, I hear this from my research on all of these greats, whether it's Frank Sinatra or Tony Bennett or Neil Diamond, or the list goes on and on and on. There's always a common denominator of you have to be yourself. Barry Manilow said the same thing when they were asking him, how do you write great songs? He goes, well, don't try to be like everybody else on the radio. You have to find your own. Same thing with Tony Bennett, who he said that about Sammy Davis Jr. When Sammy was coming up, he was starting to sound like Frank. He's like, what are you doing? You have a great voice in and of yourself. Find your voice. Neil Diamond, when he was starting, he was very much of a quiet guy, and he didn't want the limelight, really. And just out of necessity of trying to get money to pay bills, he would start taking any gig he could. But by doing that, they would ask him to talk and be on stage. But he realized he didn't know who he was at the time. He had to find out who he was. He was just trying to be like Elvis, who was big at the time, or whoever was the performer du jour. And he said, thankfully, I was a bad mimic. And I had to find out who I was.
Sure.
So by finding out who you are, and if you're truly honest about who you are, that's going to show in your performance. Another thing, as far as being an actor, when you're dealing with theater or musical theater and you're playing a role, you've got to fully be in the moment. You have to stay, so you can do all your homework and everything, but if you're not in the moment with that other artist on stage with you and not listening, most of the time, some of the best acting is not on your lines. It's how you listen to your fellow actor. And if you're able to really be there, as we are in life, that transfers. There's so many, and also
how you play the lines.
Yes.
When you're live with the audience.
Yes.
Because one night the audience could be a certain way, and you can emphasize it large, and then another night they could be in a different mindset, and you do it totally different.
Absolutely. It's still the same script, right? You still honor the playwright. But I'm a firm believer that every single performance, it's a science lab that's going on here. It's a living thing. That's why live performance is so unique, unlike any other art form, because it's happening in the moment. It's fleeting. It will be gone when the performance is over, and it will only exist in your mind after that. And so, but the energy between the artist and the audience is constantly going. And there are subtleties that apply and affect your performance. Like you said, that line might resonate to that actor a little bit differently on that performance than this performance. And that makes it living. You're watching it, people communicating and living together on a heightened level, of course. But yeah,
that's the sense of the theater.
Yes.
It has to be heightened. To have a good story, it has to be focused.
What's the point of telling the story unless it's worth telling?
The writer has to cut out all the ums and the ahs and all the long, dull moments of real life and just condense it so that it's, wow.
Yep.
Like the perfect story. Like everything is a greatest hits album,
Yes.
And so even when you're sitting there thinking, it's like a greatest hits song. No, that's very, very true. I think that There really is nothing like live theater.
No.
And you can't photograph it.
No.
It just, it is. And it's like I said to somebody once that when you're in a live performance in that room, whether it's a great theater or a smaller venue, it's like you're kind of like a family for a moment. I mean, you're related to everybody. You're breathing the same air, and there's that energy, that presence, that how do I say it? Just that experience between those who are on stage and those who are sitting in the...
Absolutely. I think it goes back to the word you used earlier. It's a relationship that you're creating, right? Before the shows that we do here, I try to come out and just get to know who the patrons are before I even take the stage.
Okay.
Just a little bit, because we're creating I want to make sure everybody feels like, we're all in this together in life in general.
Sure.
And that's one thing my mom, thanks Mom, she's like, don't ever forget where you come from. Everybody puts on their pants the same way in the morning. Nobody's better than anybody else. So just because I'm up there warbling out a tune, thankfully, I'm grateful that people pay top dollar to come see me sing. But really, the biggest thing is the gift of their time, because that's something they never will get back.
That's a very good point.
They will get their money back.
Sure.
They can make their money whatever.
Yeah.
But the most valuable thing anybody can ever give is of their time. And that is one of the biggest. I'm very honored by that. And if everybody can also realize this, one other tidbit for everybody out there, if they are wanting to pursue, it's just not only know who you are, but know that, you have this, not to get onto a big religious kick here, but I'm a firm believer that we all, no matter what we choose to do in life, for me it's performing, but no matter what it is, all of us are been given gifts. They're not ours. They're given to us.
Yeah.
And how do we choose to use those gifts? You can choose to use the gifts that you've been given to do good and lift people up and make people feel something special through your storytelling and your art that's been given to you. And you're being used as a conduit for that. You can use it for self-serving reasons. We can all know where that road most likely will lead to.
Sure.
But I think the most beneficial and the most rewarding is when you're able to take those gifts to give it to others and know that it's an honor and a blessing that you've been given those gifts. It's just how you choose to use them.
Well, thank you for the wisdom. That's I think that if I were to go into theater, stage, and performance, I would think that is really the connection, because you're connecting with an audience. I'm just to speak from your perspective, that's really the heart of that, because that really makes that thrive, and it realizes your gifts that's within you. Well, thank you very much for that insight. Next, what is coming up?
What's next?
Don? What do we have in what's in the season ahead?
Well, we are launching 2 new shows in June, towards the end of June.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned, the docu-cabaret things, I'm just having a blast delving into the behind-the-scenes stories of music that we all know and love. And so try to create a party celebrating the music of ABBA.
ABBA.
And it's called Thank You for the Music. So we take a title of one of their songs, Thank You for the Music, because we are thankful for their music, and ABBA. So great girls' night out, anybody's night out. It's just going to be a wonderful party celebrating the music of ABBA. That's on June 20th and Thursday night. And then June 21st is going to be a launch of a show called Bubbles Up. Let's celebrate Jimmy Buffett. We unfortunately lost Jimmy Buffett last year. And one of his songs at the end of his life, one of the last songs that he did and recorded was called Bubbles Up. And I love the message of Bubbles Up. It's a military term. And he was talking to a naval officer about when you're stuck and you fall into the water and you're kind of disoriented as to what are you going to do? How do you survive? You follow the bubbles. The bubbles always go up. And it's just using that a lot as a basis. It goes even deeper than that, but
Sure.
it's such a great message.
Sure.
And I try to find a message with each and every one of those shows that we create. In July, we've got Neil Diamond, Sweet Caroline.
I was going to say, are you going to have a little? You've got to have the sing-along, Sweet Caroline.
Oh, I encourage everybody to sing. If they want to get up and dance, I want them to get up and dance. It's so much fun. Yeah. So and then we'll have Tina Turner in August, August 22. So I will not be Tina Turner.
Okay.
So don't worry about that.
Will you be Neil Diamond?
I will sing Neil Diamond. There's only one Neil Diamond, but yes, I will
Gotcha.
sing his music and tell some stories. But Tina Turner, we have a amazing, talented actress and singer here in Indianapolis. Indianapolis is so rich with so much talent, and so
true.
we're writing a show around her to highlight her, Tiffany Gilliam, and she's going to sing, and that'll be August 22. And then we've got more. We have Frank, and we'll have Tony, and we'll have down the road. So
Down the road. Well, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Don, this has been just a wonderful show
thank
talking
you,
with
Dave.
you. Thank you for sharing with us, and appreciate having you on today.
I appreciate being
And-
invited on.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful program. Thank you. Well, that's it for today's episode of the Omnibus Show with Don Farrell. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Hotel Carmichael. We are recording today at Feinstein's, and we look forward to being with you on the next episode of the Omnibus Show.
If you enjoyed this program, please like, share, and subscribe to continue the conversation. For the Omnibus Show newsletter, please sign up at theomnibusshow.com.